The dress was white, the veil was long, and the man waiting at the altar was the one who destroyed my life 20 years ago. He stood there, my ex-husband, Mark, beaming like he'd won the lottery for a second time. But the woman walking toward him, that was my daughter, my only child, Claire. You think you know betrayal? You think you know how deep a knife can go? But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize that the man who broke your heart has spent 2 decades building his perfect revenge, and the final piece is your own flesh and blood. My name is Sarah, and I'm 56 years old. I've seen things. I've survived a bad marriage, an ugly divorce, and 20 years of scrambling to make ends meet. I thought I was tough. I thought Mark had no power left over me. I was wrong. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold-stamped lettering. Mark always did everything with expensive bad taste. My hands were shaking before I even saw the names. It was formal, cold, and addressed only to Ms. Sarah Jennings. I peeled open the inner envelope. The air left my lungs. Mark Andrew Peterson and Claire Elizabeth Peterson invite you to celebrate their wedding. Peterson. My daughter had already changed her last name back to his when she was 18. I remember her telling me she wanted to use her real family name. That was the first knife. This was the whole butcher block. I read the names again. Mark and Claire. My ex-husband, 55. My daughter, 25. A father and his daughter getting married. For a long time, I just stood there in the middle of my kitchen, holding that piece of paper. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even drop the mug of tea I was holding. It was a silence so complete I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. It was the sound of a bomb going off, muffled. Mark was always a powerful man, but his power wasn't in his fists. It was in his wallet and his ability to see other people as things he could own. When we got divorced, Claire was 5 years old. She loved her dad, as all kids love their dad, but mostly she loved the life he gave her. The trips to Disney, the nanny, the perfect big house. When I moved out, she didn't see me escaping abuse. She saw me choosing a small, cramped apartment and an old Ford over her father's perfect world. Mark didn't miss a beat. He weaponized every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. I'd buy Claire modest new bike. Mark would show up and hand her the keys to a brand new electric scooter, laughing about how cute my little starter bike was. I'd save up for months to take her camping. Mark would whisk her off to Europe for a week, sending me pictures of her in front of the Eiffel Tower, always with a caption like, "Claire loves a 5-star experience, doesn't she, Sarah?" He wasn't trying to be a good father. He was trying to buy the child I loved and punish me with her affection. I remember one night when Claire was about 12. She was sitting in my living room doing homework. I was making dinner after working a double shift cleaning offices. She looked up at me and said, "Mom, why did you leave Dad? If you hadn't, we could still have the pool. We could go to private school." That question cut me deeper than any angry word from Mark. I tried to explain that sometimes people are happier separate, that money isn't everything. But how do you explain the subtle, soul-crushing control of an abuser to a child who only sees his bank balance? I had to tell her the simple truth. I left Mark because I couldn't be myself in that house. I want you to grow up knowing that your peace is worth more than any fancy thing." She just sighed, rolled her eyes, and went back to her homework. I knew then that Mark had done his work too well. He had painted me as the person who chose poverty and unhappiness, and him as the stable, successful victim. The distance grew into a chasm. When she turned 18, she made two big decisions. First, as I mentioned, she legally changed her last name back to Peterson, dropping the Jennings I had worked so hard to give her. Second, she chose an expensive college that I absolutely could not afford. Mark swooped in, paid the whole thing, and she never once asked me for my thoughts on her classes, her roommates, or her life. Mark had become her everything, her sponsor, her mentor, her owner. The final blow before the wedding invitation came 9 months prior. My sister, bless her gossipy heart, showed me a picture on Mark's social media page. It was a picture of Claire and Mark on a yacht in the Caribbean. Claire was wearing a small diamond ring, and the caption said, "Celebrating the new chapter." I figured she was finally engaged to some rich business partner of his. Then I looked closely. The way Mark's hand rested on her waist, the way he looked at her, it wasn't the look of a father. It was the look of a possessive man. It sent a chill right through me, a primal, wrong feeling. I confronted Claire, not with anger, but with fear. "Claire, what is this new chapter? Are you getting married? Who is this man?" She replied in a flat text message. "You wouldn't understand, Mom. He's the first man who has ever truly supported me. He makes me feel safe. He's everything Dad taught me a man should be." The sickening realization hit me like a physical punch. Mark was everything he taught her a man should be because he molded her entire view of the world. She didn't see a father. She saw a sugar daddy, a mentor, a replacement partner, all rolled into the man who claimed her. The moment the wedding invitation arrived, I knew I had to get ready. I wasn't going to ruin a wedding. I was going to ruin Mark's twisted game. Mark's greatest flaw was his need for public approval and control. The wedding was not a celebration of love. It was a grand public announcement that he had finally won. He had taken my daughter, and he was forcing me to witness it. He needed me to be there, broken, weeping, and irrelevant. That's why I had to go. But I wouldn't go empty-handed. My plan was simple. I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't fight. I would simply present a piece of cold, hard evidence that would remind everyone, especially Claire, of Mark's true nature. My weapon was locked away in the archives of my old divorce lawyer, Mr. Gibson. I called Mr. Gibson's office. He was old, tired, and initially confused. "Sarah, what do you need the old Peterson divorce files for? That was settled 20 years ago. The details are sealed." "I don't need the settlement, Mr. Gibson," I said, my voice barely a whisper but firm. "I need the transcript, the deposition Mark gave under oath." Mark had been forced to give a deposition detailing his assets, his motives, and his plans for custody. It was a vicious, calculated document. Mark's attempt to paint me as unfit, but it had worked against him in the end. He was too arrogant, too confident in his money to hide his true feelings. A week later, I was sitting in Mr. Gibson's small, stuffy office. He placed a thick, yellowed folder on the desk.
"I managed to get the full transcript, Sarah. But I have to warn you, reading this again, it's going to hurt." I opened the folder. The paper smelled like dust and regret. I skipped past the financial statements, past the allegations against me, and searched for the section on Claire. Mark had been asked about his daughter and whether he would support her financially after the divorce. I found the part I was looking for. It was a cold, 3-line exchange. I read it aloud to myself. Lawyer: Mr. Peterson, can you state for the record what your intentions are regarding your daughter's college fund? Mark: Of course. I will pay for it entirely. She is, after all, my greatest long-term investment. Lawyer: I beg your pardon, Mr. Peterson, an investment. Mark: Yes, an investment in my future. I intend to mold her into the perfect partner for my business, a symbol of my continued success, and a loyal heir to my name. I read the word investment again. 20 years ago, the judge had dismissed it as an arrogant figure of speech, but now seeing Mark marry his investment, the meaning was horrifically clear. Claire wasn't a daughter. She wasn't a wife. She was property. This was my weapon. Not an emotional outburst, not a screaming fit, but a single, undeniable truth straight from Mark's own mouth. Over the next few weeks, I didn't contact Claire. I didn't look at the wedding registry. I went about my life with a strange, unnatural calm. I bought a simple, elegant, dark blue dress. It wasn't expensive, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman Mark couldn't break 20 years ago, and that was worth more than any designer label. I practiced the moment in my mind. I wouldn't interrupt the vows. I wouldn't give Mark the scene he desperately wanted. I would wait until the whole game was over. I would wait until they were officially married, until Mark was celebrating his victory, and then I would quietly, simply deliver the price tag. The day before the wedding, I laminated a copy of that deposition page. I folded it neatly and placed it in a cream-colored envelope addressed to the groom. My heart wasn't pounding with fear. It was beating with a cold, slow rhythm of purpose. I wasn't a mother attending a wedding anymore. I was a messenger delivering a final, delayed judgment. The wedding venue was as excessive as I expected, a massive, sprawling estate in the hills, all white marble and manicured lawns. There were hundreds of people, Mark's business associates, his employees, and a few confused, distant family members who clearly knew this whole thing was wrong. I arrived late, deliberately. The music was already playing, and the officiant was standing under a huge floral archway. I slipped into a chair in the back row, unnoticed by Mark, who was too busy preening. Then the music swelled. Claire began her walk down the aisle. She was stunning. Her dress was classic, the veil flowing behind her like a river of silk. But as she walked, I didn't see a radiant bride. I saw a princess who had been waiting for the key to her kingdom, and now she was paying the ultimate price, her identity. Her face was beautiful, yes, but empty. She looked like a doll who had been dressed up, perfect and soulless. I watched her walk toward the man who had been her father, her financial anchor, and now her husband. The internal scream I had held back for 2 decades finally tried to escape my throat. "Stop, Claire! Stop running to your captor!" But I held it in. I wouldn't play his game. Mark took her hand. He smiled at her, and then he looked right past her towards my corner of the room. His eyes were smug. It was a look that said, "I won, Sarah. I took the one thing you loved, and you're here to watch me do it." The ceremony began. The words were hollow. The vows were a blur of empty promises. My fists were clenched in my lap, digging the laminated paper into my palm. The moment came. Do you, Mark Andrew Peterson, take this woman? I do, Mark's voice boomed, full of false pride. Do you, Claire Elizabeth Peterson, take this man? I do. Claire's voice was small, almost lost in the massive venue. The officiant announced them as husband and wife. The crowd burst into applause. Mark leaned down and kissed Claire, a long, possessive kiss that my skin crawled. He had his trophy. He had his victory. The applause starts to die down. The newly married couple and the officiant are still standing at the altar. This was my cue. I stood up from my chair and walked forward, slowly, silently. The applause had ended, and the sudden quiet made my soft footsteps sound like hammers on the marble floor. I didn't run. I didn't hurry. I walked with the same dignity I had used to walk out of his life those years ago. Mark noticed me first. His smile froze, and his eyes went wide. The color drained from his face as I approached. He knew instantly that the crazy ex-wife he expected wasn't here. This was someone else. I reached the altar. I didn't look at Mark. I looked at Claire. Her eyes were confused, a flicker of panic mixed with the synthetic happiness she was wearing. I handed him the envelope, placing it directly into his clammy hand. He didn't open it. He just stared at me, paralyzed. Then I looked at the crowd. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke to the air, casual, as if I were commenting on the weather. I didn't bring a gift from the registry. I brought something Mark can't buy and Claire can't ignore. I pulled out the laminated document, unfolded it, and placed it on the small table next to the flower vase. Mark leaned in to read the words. His eyes grew wider, full of the raw fear of a man whose image is seconds from crumbling. I read the quote, my voice clear and steady. No anger, just fact. Mark, 20 years ago, when you planned to control my daughter's life, you told a court under oath that Claire was your greatest long-term investment. I paused and looked at Claire. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the fear in her husband's eyes. My dearest daughter, I continued, a single tear finally tracing a path down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. Your husband has many assets, but he can't buy a soul. I brought the paperwork to remind us all what the price tag was. Mark finally found his voice. He started to yell, a low, guttural noise. Get out here! Guards, get her out of here! But it was too late. The moment the word investment left my mouth, the silent, terrible truth filled the massive space. The guests were murmuring, pointing at the document. Claire took a step back from Mark. The beautiful doll was cracking. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't stay for the breakdown. I had delivered the truth. My work was done. I drove home that day with a silence that felt like peace. It wasn't a loud, triumphant peace of winning a shouting match. It was the quiet peace of finally dropping a stone that had been weighing me down for 20 years. I didn't check the news or social media. I didn't want to know the chaos I had caused. Mark's carefully crafted public image had been shattered by a single word he had, under the assumption of privacy, spoken himself. I knew he would try to spin it, to claim I was crazy, but I had used his own language, his own court document. It was impossible to deny. The rich, respected businessman had married his daughter, and then the mother had shown up with a contract proving he only saw her as an asset. The shame would be the feast for his competition and his enemies. 2 days later, my phone rang. It wasn't Mark. It was Claire. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Mom, it's over. I left the house last night. I'm at Lisa's. I felt a surge of cold relief. Okay, honey. Are you safe? Yes.
I saw the document. I looked up the full transcript. Mark is saying I edited it, but the way he's acting, the way he's screaming at his lawyers, it's exactly what you described. He cares more about the public relations nightmare than he cares about me. She paused, and then the tears finally came. Mom, why did you let me do this? Why did you say anything before? I tried, Claire. I tried. For 20 years I tried. But you saw me as the person who had nothing to give you. I realized that the only thing Mark hadn't bought from you yet was your free will, and I couldn't give it to you with a conversation.
I had to give it to you with the truth that was louder than his money. She cried for a long time. I didn't try to fix her. I didn't say, I told you so. I just let her cry. I had no illusions that this meant we were fixed. The scars were too deep. The damage was too real. What do I do now, Mom? She finally asked. My final act of motherhood, my true wedding present, was to stop telling her what to do. You don't do anything, Claire, I told her. For the first time in your life, you stop listening to your father, you stop listening to me, and you start listening to yourself. You decide who you are and what you're worth. The wedding is over. The divorce is next. It's your life now. I hung up the phone. I hadn't gained a daughter back, but I had freed her. That was enough. Over the next year, Mark's world crumbled. The court document was admissible in the divorce proceedings, not as evidence of the marriage's wrongness, but as evidence of his control in nature and his stated intent to treat his wife as a commodity. The public humiliation was total. He lost board seats, clients, and his image was ruined. His long-term investment had completely failed. Claire is still recovering. She moved to a different state, got a modest job, and is paying off the massive college debt that Mark now refuses to cover. She hasn't been home for a holiday yet, but a few months ago, I got a postcard. It was a picture of a national park she visited alone. On the back, she had written 3 words. I'm paying my own way. That was my redemption. I didn't stop the wedding. I just made sure they would never forget the guest of honor, his old divorce papers. The man who saw his daughter as property finally had to face the price of the only thing he couldn't buy, the dignity of a mother. And that, my friends, is a receipt I will always keep.